Hello, everyone. This is Julia, and welcome back to English Without Limit. If you're new here, this channel is all about helping you improve your English every day. We upload new lessons regularly to help you listen, learn, and understand real-life English in simple, clear ways. All the stories you'll hear today are completely fictional and created only for educational purposes. Today's story begins on a sunny morning. The sky was bright blue and the air felt fresh. A man named Daniel was walking to work through the park. Birds were singing and children were playing near the fountain. Daniel liked walking through the park every morning because it helped him start the day with a calm and positive mood. As he walked, he noticed an old man sitting on a bench feeding the pigeons. The old man looked up and smiled. Daniel smiled back and said, "Good morning, sir." The old man replied, "Good morning. It's a beautiful day, isn't it?" That short conversation made Daniel feel happy. It reminded him that a few friendly words can make someone's day better. Later that morning, Daniel stopped at a small coffee shop. The shop smelled like freshly baked bread and roasted coffee beans. He ordered a cup of black coffee and a cheese sandwich. The cashier, a woman with a warm smile, said, "Would you like your coffee to go or to stay?" Daniel answered, "To go, please." When he took his coffee, he noticed that the lid wasn't closed properly and some coffee spilled on the counter. He quickly said, "I'm so sorry." The cashier said kindly, "No worries at all. It happens every day." Daniel smiled and thanked her. That simple exchange showed how polite and positive language can make small mistakes feel less stressful. On his way to work, Daniel saw a young woman trying to carry a heavy box up the stairs. He stopped and said, "Excuse me, can I help you with that?" She looked relieved and said, "Oh, thank you so much. That would be great." Together, they lifted the box to the top of the stairs. She thanked him again and said, "You're very kind." Daniel replied, "It's no problem at all. I'm happy to help." This situation is a perfect example of using helpful and polite English in real life. Phrases like, "Can I help you?" or "No problem at all" are small but powerful. They make communication smooth and friendly. In the afternoon, the weather changed. The sky became cloudy and it started to rain. Daniel didn't have an umbrella, so he ran into a nearby store to wait for the rain to stop. Inside the store, a man accidentally bumped into him and said, "Oh, sorry about that." Daniel smiled and replied, "No problem. It's quite crowded in here." They both laughed and the tension disappeared. That's how good manners and calm language can turn an awkward moment into a friendly one. After the rain stopped, Daniel finally reached his office. His coworker Emily was waiting for him. She said, "You're late today. Did something happen?" Daniel explained everything, from his morning walk to the small coffee spill and the rain. Emily laughed and said, "That sounds like a busy morning. At least you learned a lot of polite English expressions today." Daniel agreed and said, "Yes, I think being polite and kind makes the whole day better." Later in the evening, when Daniel was walking back home, he saw the same old man from the park again. The old man smiled and said, "You again. Did you have a good day?" Daniel replied, "Yes, it was a good day, full of small lessons." The old man nodded and said, "That's what life is about, learning from small moments." The next morning, the city was quiet, and the streets were still wet from last night's rain. A woman named Clara was walking to the bus stop. She worked as a teacher at a local school. While waiting for the bus, she saw a young man named Henry drop his wallet. She quickly picked it up and said, "Excuse me, I think you dropped this." Henry smiled with relief and said, "Oh, thank you so much. I didn't even notice." Clara replied, "You're welcome. It's easy to drop things when we're in a hurry. That short, polite exchange started a friendly conversation, and they both felt more positive about their morning. When Clara arrived at school, her colleague, Mrs. Parker, greeted her with a warm smile. "Good morning, Clara. How are you today?" Clara replied, "I'm great, thank you. I helped someone at the bus stop this morning, and it made me feel good." Mrs. Parker said, "That's wonderful. Helping others always brings joy." Then the bell rang, and they both went to their classrooms. In the classroom, one of Clara's students, a boy named Adam, looked a little sad. She asked, "Adam, are you okay today?" He said softly, "I forgot my homework at home." Clara smiled and said, "That's all right, Adam. Just bring it tomorrow. Everyone forgets things sometimes." Her kind response made Adam smile again. Later, when he finished his classwork, he said, "Thank you, Miss Clara. I'll make sure to do better tomorrow." Clara replied, "That's the right attitude, Adam. I'm proud of you." Meanwhile, in another part of the city, a man named James was fixing his car outside his house. His neighbor, Mrs. Lee, walked by and asked, "Car trouble again?" James laughed and said, "Yes, the engine doesn't like cold mornings." Mrs. Lee said, "Would you like a cup of tea while you work?" James smiled and said, "That would be lovely, thank you." A few minutes later, she returned with 2 cups of tea, and they chatted about their neighborhood. That small act of kindness made the morning brighter for both of them. Across town, in a small grocery store, a woman named Helen was shopping with her little daughter Lucy. Lucy pointed at the apples and said, "Mom, can we buy some of those?" Helen replied, "Of course, sweetie. Let's pick the red ones." While they were checking out, the cashier, a man named Robert, said, "Those apples are very fresh today." Helen smiled and said, "That's great to hear. Thank you for the suggestion." Lucy added, "Thank you, mister." Robert laughed and said, "You're very welcome, young lady." Later that afternoon, a delivery driver named Thomas was bringing packages to different homes. At one house, he met an elderly woman named Mrs. Davis. She said, "Thank you for always being so careful with the deliveries." Thomas replied, "It's my pleasure, ma'am. I hope your family enjoys the package." Mrs. Davis smiled and said, "You have a kind heart, young man." Polite words like these made both of them feel respected and appreciated. That evening, as the sun was setting, Clara met her friend Michael at the park for a walk. They often talked about their day and shared little stories. Clara told him about helping Henry in the morning and comforting her student Adam. Michael said, "You always find ways to make people feel better." Clara replied, "I just think kindness doesn't cost anything." As they walked, they saw Daniel, the man from the earlier story, sitting near the fountain reading a book. Clara waved and said, "Hello there. Lovely evening, isn't it?" Daniel looked up and said, "Yes, it's peaceful after a busy day." Near the park gate, they saw a young couple, Emma and Davy, taking photos of the sunset. Emma said, "The colors look beautiful today." David replied, "Yes, the light makes everything look calm." They smiled when Clara and Michael passed by, and everyone exchanged a polite good evening. These small, friendly connections between people created a feeling of warmth and community that everyone could feel. As night arrived, lights began to shine from the buildings, and the sound of traffic slowly faded away. People returned home with different stories from their day, stories of kindness, patience, and respect. Each of these moments showed that good communication and polite English can turn ordinary days into meaningful experiences. The next day began with a cool breeze and clear skies. A young man named Oliver was walking through the city square carrying a small box. Inside was a gift for his coworker Sophia, who had helped him finish an important project. When Oliver reached the office, he said, "Good morning, Sophia. I wanted to thank you for helping me last week." He handed her the box and she smiled, saying, "That's so thoughtful, Oliver. You didn't have to do that." He replied, "It's just a small way to say thank you." That polite gesture made their work environment more friendly and respectful. At lunchtime, Sophia met her husband, Ethan, at a nearby restaurant. They ordered vegetable soup and rice. The waiter, a young man named Lucas, greeted them politely and said, "Would you like water or juice to start with?" Sophia replied, "Water, please. Thank you." Lucas smiled and said, "You're welcome. I'll bring it right away." Throughout the meal, they noticed how polite the waiter was, and it made their lunch more enjoyable. When they finished, Ethan said, "Thank you for your great service." Lucas replied, "It's my pleasure, sir. Have a wonderful afternoon." Outside the restaurant, an elderly man named Mr. Wilson was selling handmade baskets. A woman named Anna stopped by and said, "These are beautiful. Did you make them yourself?" Mr. Wilson smiled proudly and said, "Yes, I make them every morning using bamboo." Anna bought one and said, "Thank you for your hard work. It's lovely." The old man replied, "Thank you for supporting my craft." That short exchange showed how kind words can make a simple purchase meaningful. A few streets away, a young delivery woman named Grace was riding her bicycle to deliver packages. Suddenly, her tire went flat. A passerby named Mark noticed and said, "It looks like you need some help." Grace replied, "Yes, my tire is flat and I don't have a pump." Mark said, "I have one in my shop just around the corner. Let's fix it." Together, they repaired the tire. Grace thanked him, saying, "You really saved my day." Mark smiled. Meanwhile, at a local park, a mother named Yulia was playing with her son Leo. Leo accidentally threw his ball near a man reading a newspaper. The man, named Peter, picked up the ball and handed it back, saying, "Here you go, young man." Julia said, "I'm so sorry for the disturbance." Peter smiled and said, "No problem at all. Kids should play and have fun." Julia thanked him, and they both continued enjoying the peaceful afternoon. Later in the day, a baker named Caroline was preparing bread for her shop. Her assistant, Noah, was learning how to bake for the first time. She said, "Remember, Noah, good bread takes time. You must be patient." Noah nodded and said, "Thank you for teaching me. I'll try again." Caroline replied, "That's the spirit. Practice makes perfect." Their teamwork filled the bakery with a warm and positive energy. Not far from the bakery, an artist named Rachel was painting on the sidewalk. A curious child named Ben stopped and said, "That looks amazing. How do you do that?" Rachel smiled and said, "Thank you, Ben. I just use my imagination and a little patience." Ben said, "I want to paint like you someday." Rachel replied, "You can if you practice every day." That moment inspired the boy to dream big and never give up. That evening, Oliver, Sophia, and Ethan all happened to walk through the same park on their way home. They saw Caroline closing her bakery and waving to her assistant, Noah. Across the street, Rachel packed her art supplies, and the old man, Mr. Wilson, walked by carrying his empty basket cart. Each of them had lived a different story that day, filled with kindness, gratitude, and simple English conversations that connected them. The sound of the city slowly softened as the day ended. Lights from houses began to glow, and the cool evening air carried the smell of bread, flowers, and rain. All these small stories showed how polite English, warm gestures, and a friendly attitude can make every ordinary day feel a little more special. The following morning, the city was filled with the sound of birds and early traffic. A woman named Maria stepped out of her house holding a basket of fresh flowers. She owned a small flower shop near the train station. As she opened her shop, her neighbor Mr. Howard walked by and said, "Good morning, Maria. Your flowers look beautiful today." She smiled and replied, "Thank you, Mr. Howard. I just brought them from the garden." He said, "They make the whole street look cheerful." That kind exchange set a positive tone for her day. A few minutes later, a customer named Samuel entered the shop. He said, "Good morning. Could I have a bouquet for my wife's birthday?" Maria replied, "Of course. What colors does she like?" Samuel thought for a moment and said, "She loves white and pink." Maria carefully arranged the flowers and tied them with a ribbon. When she handed them over, Samuel said, "They're perfect. Thank you so much." Maria replied, "You're very welcome, and happy birthday to your wife." Across town, a taxi driver named Patrick started his morning shift. His first passenger was a woman named Irene who was going to the hospital to visit her sister. Patrick said, "Good morning, ma'am. Where would you like to go today?" Irene replied, "To the city hospital, please." During the ride, they talked about the weather and daily life. When they arrived, Irene said, "Thank you for the ride. You're very kind." Patrick smiled and said, "I hope your sister feels better soon." That short conversation made her feel comforted. At a nearby bakery, a man named David was buying some bread for his family. The baker, Mrs. Collins, greeted him cheerfully. "Good morning, David. Would you like your usual loaf today?" He replied, "Yes, please, and 2 muffins for my children." Mrs. Collins placed the bread and muffins in a bag and said, "Here you go. Have a lovely morning." David smiled and replied, "Thank you, Mrs. Collins. See you tomorrow." Later that afternoon, 2 students, Lily and Jacob, were studying at the library. Lily said, "Jacob, can you help me understand this English paragraph?" Jacob looked at her notebook and said, "Sure. It means that sometimes actions speak louder than words." Lily nodded and said, "Oh, that makes sense now. Thank you." Jacob replied, "No problem. That's what friends are for." Their study session continued peacefully as the sound of turning pages filled the quiet room. Outside the library, an old gardener named Mr. Brown was planting new flowers near the entrance. A young lady named Ava stopped and said, "Those flowers look so pretty." Mr. Brown smiled and said, "Thank you, young lady. These flowers will make this place more colorful." Ava said, "I like helping my mother with her garden too." Mr. Brown replied, "That's wonderful. Gardening teaches patience and care." In the evening, as the sun began to set, Maria closed her flower shop and walked home. On her way, she saw Patrick's taxi parked near the park. He waved and said, "Good evening, Maria. Busy day?" She replied, "Yes, but a good one. I met so many kind people today." Patrick nodded and said, "Kindness makes the world go round." Nearby, Mrs. Collins was walking home carrying a basket of leftover bread. She saw Mr. Brown sitting on a bench and said, "Would you like some fresh bread, Mr. Brown?" He smiled and said, "That's very kind of you. Thank you." She replied, "It's my pleasure. No food should go to waste." That simple act of sharing ended the day beautifully. As night slowly fell, the lights of the town began to twinkle. People like Maria, Patrick, and Lily finished their busy days, each carrying small memories of kindness, patience, and polite English words that connected them to others. The next day started quietly with the sound of rain tapping on the windows. A man named Andrew woke up early and prepared a cup of warm tea. He worked as a postman and had to deliver letters even on rainy days. As he walked down the street with his umbrella, he saw an elderly woman named Mrs. Green standing at her gate, struggling to open it. Andrew said, "Good morning, Mrs. Green. Let me help you with that." She smiled and said, "Thank you, Andrew. My hands are a bit stiff today." He helped her open the gate, and she said, "You're always so helpful. Have a safe day." A few blocks away, a young woman named Sarah was preparing breakfast for her husband, Daniel. She said, "I made your favorite porridge this morning." Daniel smiled and replied, "You always know how to make my day better." As they ate, Sarah said, "You have a long drive today. Don't forget your raincoat." Daniel nodded and said, "I won't. Thanks for reminding me." Their polite and caring words showed the warmth of simple family life. At the bus stop, a man named Leo was waiting beside a woman named Emily. She looked nervous because it was her first day at a new job. Leo noticed and said kindly, "Are you all right? You look a bit worried." Emily smiled shyly and said, "It's my first day and I'm afraid of being late." Leo replied, "You'll do great. Just take a deep breath and smile. Confidence always helps." His calm advice made her feel better, and they both laughed when the bus finally arrived. At a local cafe, a barista named Hannah was preparing coffee for customers. A man named Victor came in, dripping wet from the rain. He said, "Could I please have a cup of hot chocolate?" Hannah replied, cheerfully, "Of course. You must be cold. Please take a seat and I'll bring it right over." A few minutes later, she served his drink and said, "Here you go. Extra warm." Victor smiled and said, "Thank you for being so kind." Hannah replied, "That's what I'm here for." Meanwhile, at a nearby bookstore, a little boy named Ethan was looking at storybooks with his mother, Laura. He picked up a book and said, "Mom, can you read this one to me tonight?" Laura smiled and said, "Of course, sweetheart. Reading helps you learn new words." The shop owner, Mr. Carter, overheard them and said, "That's a great choice. It's one of my favorites." Laura replied, "Thank you. You have a lovely store." Mr. Carter nodded and said, "Books are friends that never leave us." Later in the afternoon, Sarah went to the grocery store to buy vegetables. At the counter, she met a friendly cashier named Paula. Sarah said, "These carrots look so fresh today." Paula replied, "Yes, they came in this morning from a local farm." Sarah smiled and said, "That's wonderful. Thank you for your help." Paula said, "You're very welcome. Have a nice day." Outside the store, Andrew, the postman, passed by again. He waved at Sarah and said, "Still raining, I see." She laughed and said, "Yes, but it's a cozy day to stay indoors." Andrew replied, "That's true. A warm cup of tea makes everything better." They both smiled and went on with their day. At the same time, Emily finally arrived at her new office, Her manager, Mr. Allen, greeted her warmly and said, "Welcome, Emily. We're happy to have you on the team." She replied, "Thank you, sir. I'm excited to start." Mr. Allen said, "Take your time to learn. If you need help, just ask." Emily felt more relaxed knowing she was working in a kind environment. In the evening, the rain stopped and the streets reflected the golden lights from the shops. People like Andrew, Sarah, and Emily ended their day with gratitude. The next morning, the sun was shining again after the long rain. A cheerful man named Ryan was cleaning the sidewalk in front of his small fruit shop. He arranged oranges and apples neatly in wooden baskets. As he worked, a little girl named Nora stopped with her mother, Kate. Nora pointed at the fruits and said, "Mom, look how shiny they are." Ryan smiled and said, "Would you like to try a slice of apple?" Kate replied, "That's very kind of you." Nora tasted it and said, "It's sweet." Ryan laughed and said, "Fresh from the farm this morning." The small moment brought smiles to everyone's faces. A few streets away, a bus driver named Martin started his morning route. His first passengers were two schoolboys, Liam and Aaron. As they got on the bus, Liam said, "Good morning, sir." Martin smiled and replied, "Good morning, boys. How's school going?" Aaron answered, "It's going well, thank you." Martin said, "That's great. Always study hard and be kind." The boys nodded and sat near the window watching the city wake up. At the same time, a woman named Olivia was walking her dog in the park. She met another walker, a man named Ben, who was out for a jog. Olivia said, "Good morning. It's such a nice day for exercise." Ben replied, "Yes, it feels great after all that rain." As they talked, Olivia's dog barked softly. Ben smiled and said, "He looks friendly." Olivia laughed and said, "He just likes meeting new people." They continued walking together, enjoying the peaceful morning air. Meanwhile, in a nearby office building, a receptionist named Diana was welcoming visitors. A man named Mr. Harris approached her desk and said, "Good morning. I have an appointment with Mr. Clark." Diana replied, "Yes, Mr. Harris. Please take a seat and he'll be with you shortly." A few minutes later, Mr. Clark came out and greeted him. "Good to see you again," he said. Mr. Harris smiled and said, "Thank you. It's always a pleasure to work together." Their polite exchange showed how professionalism and respect make communication smooth. At the same time, in a bakery down the street, a young woman named Lucy was decorating cakes with colorful icing. Her coworker David said, "You always make the cakes look amazing." Lucy smiled and said, "Thank you. I think people can feel joy through good food." Just then, an elderly customer named Mrs. White entered and said, "I'd like to order a cake for my husband's birthday." Lucy replied, "Of course. What kind of cake would you like?" Mrs. White said, "Something simple, maybe vanilla with cream." Lucy nodded and said, "That will be ready by tomorrow morning." Mrs. White smiled and said, "Thank you, dear. You're very kind." Across town, Ryan closed his fruit shop for lunch and walked to a small cafe owned by Diana's brother, Jacob. Jacob said, "Welcome, Ryan. The usual tea and sandwich?" Ryan laughed and said, "You know me too well." As he ate, a couple named Noah and Emma sat at the next table talking about their plans for the weekend. They greeted Ryan politely, and he replied, Nice to see friendly faces today. It was a calm, pleasant afternoon filled with friendly voices and simple, polite words. Later, as the sun began to set, Martin finished his bus route and parked near the park. He saw Olivia and Ben still walking and waved at them. Olivia waved back, saying, "Have a good evening." Martin replied, "You too. Take care." A little further away, Lucy left the bakery carrying a small bag of leftover bread. She noticed a man sitting on a bench and said, "Would you like some fresh bread?" The man smiled and said, "That's very kind, thank you." The town slowly quieted as the evening grew darker. Lights glowed from shops and houses, and people like Ryan, Olivia, and Lucy returned home after a day full of kind words and gentle actions that made ordinary life feel special. The following morning began quietly, with the sun rising over the city. The streets were calm, and the air carried the faint smell of freshly baked bread from local bakeries. A man named Jonathan was jogging along the riverside. It was his daily routine, and he enjoyed starting the day with exercise. As he ran, he noticed a young boy named Ethan flying a small kite. The kite got stuck in a tree, and Ethan looked disappointed. Jonathan stopped and said, "Hello, would you like me to help you?" Ethan nodded eagerly, and Jonathan carefully retrieved the kite. "Thank you so much," Ethan said, smiling. "You're welcome," Jonathan replied. "I'm happy to help." That small act of kindness brightened both their mornings. Meanwhile, across town, a woman named Melissa was preparing breakfast for her husband, Brian. She placed a plate of toast and scrambled eggs on the table and said, "Good morning, Brian. I made your favorite breakfast." Brian smiled and replied, "Thank you, Melissa. You always make mornings better." As they ate, Melissa reminded him gently, "Don't forget your meeting later. I hope it goes well." Brian nodded and said, "I'll do my best. Thanks for the support." Their polite and caring conversation highlighted the importance of simple, friendly words in daily life. Later, Jonathan returned home from his run. His neighbor, Mrs. Taylor, was gardening outside her house. She looked up and said, "Good morning, Jonathan. The flowers look lovely today." Jonathan replied, "Thank you, Mrs. Taylor. They remind me that small things can bring a lot of happiness." She smiled and said, "Exactly. A little care goes a long way." Jonathan waved and continued inside, feeling grateful for these simple, positive interactions. At a nearby cafe, a young man named Oliver was meeting his friend Clara. They both ordered coffee and pastries. Oliver said, "I'm glad we could meet today. It's been a busy week." Clara replied, "Yes, it's good to take a short break and enjoy a calm morning." The waiter, a friendly man named Samuel, brought their drinks and said, "Here you go. Enjoy." Clara smiled and said, "Thank you. Everything smells delicious." Samuel nodded. "It's my pleasure. I hope you have a lovely day." During their conversation, Oliver and Clara practiced using polite expressions, showing how even ordinary moments can improve English skills. Meanwhile, in a small bookstore nearby, a young girl named Sophie was browsing books. She looked at a shelf filled with illustrated stories and said, "Mom, can I choose this one?" Her mother, Rachel, replied, "Of course, Sophie. It looks fun." Sophie ran her fingers over the cover, then brought it to the counter. The cashier, a man named Henry, smiled and said, "This is a great choice. You'll enjoy reading it." Sophie beamed. "Thank you." Henry nodded. You're very welcome. The simple exchange reinforced how polite words help create a friendly atmosphere even in everyday situations. Across town, a man named Daniel was delivering packages. One delivery was for an elderly couple, Mr. and Mrs. Henderson. Daniel greeted them. "Good morning. I have a package for you." Mrs. Henderson smiled and said, "Thank you, Daniel. You're always so punctual." Daniel replied, "It's my pleasure. I hope everything inside is in good condition." They invited him in briefly to rest from the rain outside, and Daniel felt appreciated. Moments like these showed how small kindnesses can make daily routines enjoyable. At the park, Jonathan noticed a woman named Emily teaching her younger brother, Alex, how to ride a bicycle. Alex was struggling to keep his balance and looked frustrated. Jonathan approached and said, "Would you like some help?" Emily nodded. "That would be great." Jonathan held the bicycle steady while Alex pedaled carefully. "I did it!" he shouted, laughing. Emily and Jonathan clapped and encouraged him. "See? Practice and patience always help," Jonathan said. This simple story demonstrates how offering help and encouragement in English builds not only language skills, but also trust and confidence. Later in the afternoon, Melissa and Brian went for a short walk in the park to enjoy the fresh air. They saw Jonathan sitting on a bench reading a book. Brian waved and said, "Good afternoon, Jonathan." Jonathan smiled and replied, "Hello, it's a beautiful day for reading." As they talked, a street musician named Lucas began to play gentle guitar music nearby. People stopped to listen and smiled. Jonathan said to Melissa, "Music always makes the day feel better, doesn't it?" Melissa nodded, "Yes, and it's amazing how small joys make a big difference." This interaction highlighted how everyday moments can be used to practice conversational English naturally. Meanwhile, in a small grocery store, a woman named Vanessa was buying vegetables. She selected tomatoes and cucumbers and placed them on the counter. The cashier, a young man named Noah, scanned the items and said, "These look fresh today." Vanessa smiled and replied, "Yes, they're from the local farm. Thank you for noticing." Noah laughed softly. "It's my pleasure. I love fresh vegetables too." Vanessa said, "I hope you enjoy them." Their friendly exchange showed how even routine transactions are opportunities to practice polite English phrases. In the evening, Jonathan returned home from his walk in the park. He found his neighbor, Clara, sitting on her balcony watering her plants. Jonathan waved and said, "Good evening, Clara. How was your day?" Clara replied, "It was wonderful. I met some friends and enjoyed the sun. How about you?" Jonathan said, "It was peaceful. I helped a few people today and it felt good." Clara smiled and said, "Acts of kindness always make the day brighter." These small talks reinforce the idea that polite language connects people and makes ordinary life richer. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the city, casting a golden glow over the streets. The air was fresh and cool, and the smell of morning dew mixed with the aroma of fresh bread from nearby bakeries. A man named Thomas was leaving his apartment early to catch the train. He was a teacher and had to prepare for a class at a nearby school. As he walked down the street, he saw a young boy, Max, struggling to tie his shoelaces. Thomas knelt down and said, "Hello, Max. Would you like some help?" Max nodded, and Thomas showed him a simple way to tie them. Thank you, Max said, smiling. Thomas replied, You're welcome. Have a good day at school. At the same time, across town, a woman named Clara was waiting at the bus stop. She carried a small bag with fresh flowers she had bought from the market for her husband, John. As she stood there, an elderly man named Mr. Benson walked past her holding a small package. He looked confused, trying to read the address. Clara said politely, Do you need help? Mr. Benson nodded. Yes, please. I'm not sure where to go. Clara looked at the package and said, I can show you the way. It's just 2 blocks from here. Together, they walked, chatting gently about the neighborhood and the sunny morning. By the time they reached the address, Mr. Benson said, Thank you very much, young lady. You made my day easier. Clara replied, It was no trouble at all. I'm glad I could help. Meanwhile, Thomas arrived at the school and met his colleague, Mrs. Riley. She was organizing books for the classroom library. Good morning, Thomas. Did you have a smooth walk? She asked. Thomas smiled and said, Yes, very smooth. I helped a boy with his shoes on the way. It felt good to do something kind. Mrs. Riley laughed softly and said, It's amazing how small gestures can make someone's day brighter. Let's start. Inside the classroom, a student named Daniel seemed a little nervous. Yulia noticed and asked gently, Daniel, is everything all right? Daniel replied, I'm just worried about today's lesson. I didn't understand the last chapter. Yulia nodded and said, That's okay. We'll go through it together. Take your time and don't be afraid to ask questions. By explaining slowly and using simple words, Yulia helped Daniel feel confident again. Thank you, Yulia, Daniel said, smiling. You make learning easier. At a nearby cafe, a young woman named Laura was waiting for her friend Emily. Laura ordered a cup of tea and a small sandwich. The barista, a cheerful man named Ryan, greeted her with a smile and said, Good morning. Your tea will be ready shortly. Laura thanked him politely. When Emily arrived, they sat near the window watching the street. They noticed a man struggling to carry a box of groceries. Laura said, Let's help him. Together, they approached the man whose name was Mark and offered to carry the box to his car. Mark was grateful, saying, Thank you so much. I couldn't have managed alone. Laura smiled and replied, It's no problem. We're happy to help. Small acts like this created warmth and connection in the city. Later at the local market, a young girl named Sophie was helping her mother Yulia pick vegetables. Sophie picked up a tomato and said, Mom, this one looks fresh. Yulia nodded and said, Yes, it's perfect for our salad tonight. While paying at the counter, the cashier, a man named Alex, smiled and said, Looks like you have a delicious meal planned. Yulia replied, Yes, thank you. We love fresh vegetables. Alex handed them the bag and said, You're very welcome. Have a lovely evening. These simple exchanges showed how everyday conversations in English could be polite, friendly, and helpful. In the afternoon, Yulia went for a short walk after class. She noticed a man named Simon trying to fix his bicycle near the park. Yulia approached and said, Do you need some help? Simon replied, Yes, I can't get the chain back on. Yulia carefully helped him, explaining each step. Thank you, Simon said. You're very patient. Julia smiled. Helping each other is always a good lesson, both in life and in English communication. At the same time, Clara was at home arranging flowers for her husband, John, who had just returned from work. John smiled as he entered. The house smells amazing. Did you buy these for me? Clara replied, Yes, I thought it would brighten your day. They shared a warm conversation about their morning and plans for the evening, showing how English can be used naturally in everyday life to express care and thoughtfulness. Meanwhile, Laura and Emily returned home after the cafe. On the way, they saw an elderly man struggling to cross the street. They stopped, and Emily said, Sir, do you need help? The man, named Mr. White, nodded gratefully. Thank you. It's hard to walk when the sidewalk is wet. Laura held his arm gently, and together they crossed safely. Mr. White said, You two are very kind. Emily smiled and said, It's our pleasure. We're glad you're safe. Helping others and speaking politely in English made the experience meaningful for everyone involved. In the evening, Sophie helped her mother prepare dinner. She practiced describing each ingredient in English. We need tomatoes, cucumbers, and carrots, she said proudly. Julia listened and repeated the words with her, reinforcing vocabulary naturally. Meanwhile, Julia reflected on all the small interactions she had during the day, helping Daniel, greeting Ryan at the cafe, assisting Simon with his bicycle. Each act was an opportunity to practice English communication in real life. Across the city, small acts of kindness continued. Mark carried groceries inside with Laura and Emily's help. Clara and John enjoyed a peaceful evening at home. Sophie and Julia prepared dinner while practicing English words. Ryan, the barista, cleaned tables, smiling at every customer who entered. Alex, the cashier, finished his shift while greeting everyone politely. Simon, with his bicycle repaired, rode home feeling grateful. Emily and Laura walked slowly, talking about how simple gestures make life better. Mr. White returned home safely after being helped across the street. Daniel reviewed his lesson with confidence after Julia's guidance. As night fell, the city lights reflected on the quiet streets. People like Julia, Clara, Laura, Emily, Sophie, Mark, John, Ryan, Alex, Simon, and Daniel, 10 characters living ordinary lives, experienced moments of connection, learning, and English practice. Each conversation, whether helping a neighbor, greeting a cashier, or speaking with the student, reinforced polite English, kindness, and patience. Even small sentences like, thank you, do you need help, or you're welcome, strengthened relationships and boosted confidence. The day ended quietly, with the streets glowing under the soft light of lamps. Each person reflected on the small successes and kindnesses of the day. Julia thought about Daniel and the lesson of patience. Clara thought about helping Mr. White and the importance of polite words. Laura and Emily remembered assisting Mark with groceries, seeing how small actions matter. Sophie practiced English vocabulary with her mother. Daniel felt more confident in his studies. Across the city, people connected through words, gestures, and thoughtful actions. showing that ordinary days are filled with extraordinary learning opportunities. By focusing on real-life situations, helping someone, teaching a child, buying vegetables, or greeting neighbors, each person had multiple chances to use English naturally. These everyday experiences taught vocabulary, polite expressions, listening skills, and confidence. Simple actions combined with friendly conversations created stories worth remembering. People smiled, learned, helped, and practiced English without even realizing it. These ordinary moments became lessons in language, life, and connection. And even as the night settled in, the city remained alive with quiet lessons, kindness, respect, patience, and English communication in action. Each person, from Thomas helping a boy to Sophie learning new words, contributed to a living story that any English learner could relate to. Small gestures, polite conversations, and real-life practice made English learning feel natural and rewarding. The following morning, the sun rose slowly behind the city buildings. The streets were quiet, and the smell of fresh bread from nearby bakeries filled the air. A man named Michael walked down the street with his dog Toby. It was a crisp morning, perfect for a short walk before work. As they passed a small park, Michael noticed a boy named Samuel trying to kick a football. The ball got stuck on a bench. Michael smiled and said, "Do you want me to get it for you?" Samuel nodded eagerly. Michael handed the ball back and said, "Try to kick it gently next time." Samuel laughed. "Thanks, sir. I'll be careful." Across town, a woman named Hannah was opening her small bookstore. She arranged books on the shelves and noticed her first customer, a young girl named Lily. Lily picked up a picture book and asked, "Can you tell me the story?" Hannah smiled and said, "Of course. This story is about a brave little fox who helps his friends." As Hannah read aloud, Lily listened carefully, pointing at the illustrations and repeating simple words after her. After finishing, Lily said, "I like the fox. He's very smart." Hannah nodded, "Yes, and he teaches us to be kind and brave." Meanwhile, at a local cafe, a man named Thomas was having breakfast. A young barista named Olivia prepared his coffee and said, "Good morning. Would you like your usual cappuccino?" Thomas smiled, "Yes, please. Thank you." As he sipped the coffee, a woman named Rachel entered, looking tired. Rachel asked politely, "Would you like me to get a table for you?" Rachel nodded. "Thank you very much." Thomas smiled at Rachel and said, "It's a busy morning today, isn't it?" Rachel replied, "Yes, but the coffee makes it better." They chatted briefly, practicing friendly small talk in English. At the nearby market, a man named David was buying vegetables for dinner. He carefully selected tomatoes, lettuce, and carrots. The cashier, a young man named Alex, smiled and said, "Good morning. These vegetables look fresh today." David replied, "Yes, they're from the local farm. Thank you." Alex bagged items and said, "You're welcome. Have a nice day." A woman named Grace, standing behind him, overheard and smiled. She said, "Fresh vegetables make cooking more enjoyable." David nodded. "Absolutely, and they're healthy too." Meanwhile, Michael returned home from his morning walk. His wife, Sarah, was preparing breakfast. She placed a plate of scrambled eggs and toast on the table. "Good morning, Michael. Did you enjoy your walk?" she asked. Michael replied, "Yes, and I helped a boy with his football. It felt good." Sarah smiled. Small acts of kindness make the day brighter. They ate breakfast together, chatting about their plans and practicing polite English sentences naturally. Later, in a park, a man named John was jogging. He noticed an elderly woman named Mrs. Edwards struggling to carry her shopping bags. John ran over and said, "Can I help you with these?" Mrs. Edwards smiled gratefully. "Oh, thank you, young man. That's very kind." John carried the bags to her apartment building and said, "It's no trouble at all. I hope the day gets better for you." Mrs. Edwards nodded. "It already has, thanks to you." Small gestures like this showed how English and kindness could combine to create meaningful interactions. At a school nearby, a student named Daniel was having trouble with his homework. His older sister, Laura, sat beside him and said, "Let's read the questions carefully and understand them step by step." Daniel listened and repeated after her, "Step by step. That makes sense." Laura explained slowly, using simple sentences, and Daniel's confidence grew. He said, "Thank you, Laura. I understand now." Laura smiled. "You're welcome. Learning together makes it easier." Meanwhile, at a grocery store, a young man named Peter noticed a woman, Emma, struggling to reach a can on a high shelf. He said politely, "Do you want me to get that for you?" Emma smiled and said, "Thank you. That's very kind." Peter handed her the can and she said, "I appreciate your help. Small gestures make life easier." Peter replied, "It's nothing. Helping others is important." This short exchange highlighted simple ways to use English politely and respectfully in everyday life. Across town, a man named Lucas was walking his daughter Mia to school. Mia pointed at the flowers along the street and said, "Daddy, look, they're so pretty." Lucas replied, "Yes, they are. Nature makes everything beautiful." Mia smiled and said, "I want to draw them later." Lucas encouraged her, "That's a great idea. Drawing helps you remember things and learn new words." This showed how parents can teach children English naturally through everyday experiences. In the evening, Michael, Sarah, Thomas, Hannah, Olivia, David, Alex, Grace, John, and Mrs. Edwards, all 10 people, ended their day with small accomplishments and warm feelings. Michael reflected on helping Samuel with his football. Sarah thought about sharing breakfast and practicing English. Thomas enjoyed small talk with Rachel. Hannah saw Lily learning new words. Olivia greeted customers politely. David and Alex shared a friendly exchange at the market. Grace appreciated the joy of fresh vegetables. John helped Mrs. Edwards carry shopping. Laura guided Daniel with his homework. Peter assisted Emma with the can. Lucas encouraged Mia to explore her creativity. All these moments, though ordinary, were filled with simple English words, polite expressions, and meaningful interactions. Words like thank you, you're welcome, please, and excuse me were used naturally. Each person learned new vocabulary, practiced pronunciation, and developed confidence in real-life contexts. By the end of the day, the city was calm. Street lights reflected on quiet pavements. Homes glowed warmly, and families shared small stories about their day. Michael reflected on kindness. Sarah thought about sharing breakfast and practicing English. Thomas enjoyed small talk with Rachel. Hannah saw Lily learning new words. Olivia served customers with a smile. David and Alex shared simple words while shopping. John realized the joy of helping Mrs. Edwards. Laura guided Daniel patiently. Peter assisted Emma. Lucas encouraged Mia. Each moment was an example of real English practice in natural settings. These ordinary, realistic stories show that English learning is not just about reading or writing. It's about connecting, helping, and communicating. From mornings filled with small gestures to evenings of reflection, each person demonstrated how language can be part of daily life, making every conversation meaningful. Simple acts like greeting someone, helping with a task, or explaining something patiently create opportunities for natural English practice. As night fully arrived, the city grew quiet. Windows glowed softly. Streets were empty, and families rested after their day. Michael and Sarah read together, practicing sentences. Hannah tidied her bookstore, thinking about Lily's excitement. Thomas reviewed lesson plans for his students. Olivia closed the cafe, smiling at the last customers. David prepared dinner with Alex's help. Grace enjoyed her meal. John felt content after helping others. Laura praised Daniel's progress. Peter reflected on the value of politeness. Lucas tucked Mia into bed, telling her a story with simple English words. In all these real-life inspired stories, each person experienced English naturally. By listening to everyday conversations, practicing polite words, and observing interactions, learners could improve their listening, vocabulary, and confidence. Everyday life, walking in the park, visiting a cafe, shopping, or helping someone offers countless opportunities to learn English without feeling forced. And even as the night quieted the city, the lessons remained. Kindness, patience, polite conversation, careful listening, and natural English practice make life richer. The next morning, the city woke up slowly under a soft golden sunrise. The streets smelled of fresh bread and coffee. A man named Andrew was walking to the train station holding a small umbrella because the forecast predicted light rain. On his way, he noticed a young boy, Leo, trying to balance on a low wall while carrying his school bag. Andrew gently called, "Careful there, you might fall." Leo laughed nervously and said, "I'm okay, sir." Andrew replied, "It's good to be careful. Let's walk together on the sidewalk." Leo smiled and ran beside him. Andrew thought, small guidance makes a big difference for children learning responsibility and confidence. Meanwhile, at a nearby bakery, a woman named Julia was setting out freshly baked croissants. Her coworker Kevin greeted her cheerfully. "Good morning, Julia. The smell today is amazing." Julia smiled. "Thank you, Kevin. Let's make sure everything is ready for the morning rush." A man named Samuel entered the bakery, looking tired but polite. Julia said, "Good morning, sir. Would you like your usual pastry?" Samuel nodded and replied, "Yes, please. Thank you." As he sipped his coffee, he complimented Julia, "These croissants are perfect every time." Julia laughed softly. "We put love into our baking." This small exchange highlighted how politeness and friendliness in daily life help English learners practice natural conversation. Across town, a young teacher named Laura was walking toward her classroom. On the way, she noticed a man named Patrick trying to fix his car tire. The jack had slipped, and he looked frustrated. Laura approached and said, "Do you need some help?" Patrick hesitated, then said, "Yes, please. I've never done this before." Laura carefully explained each step, showing him how to lift the car safely and change the tire. After a few minutes, the tire was fixed. Patrick smiled. "Thank you so much. You saved me time and worry." Laura replied, "It's nothing. I'm glad I could help." Acts like this showed how English can be used naturally to offer assistance and explain actions clearly. At a small grocery store, A young woman named Anna was picking vegetables for dinner. She held a basket full of tomatoes, spinach, and onions, and approached the cashier, a man named David. "Good morning," David said. "You've chosen fresh vegetables today." Anna smiled. "Thank you. I always like to get the best for my family." David replied, "It's important to cook with care. Enjoy your meal." A man standing behind her, named Lucas, overheard and added, "Fresh ingredients make all the difference." Anna nodded. "Absolutely. It's worth the extra effort." These polite exchanges made shopping a place to practice friendly English naturally. Meanwhile, Andrew reached the train station and saw a young woman, Mia, struggling to read the timetable. Andrew approached and said politely, "Do you want me to help you check the train times?" Mia smiled gratefully. "Yes, please. I'm new here." Andrew explained slowly, pointing to the schedule. "The train to the city center leaves at 8:15, and the next one is at 8:45. Mia nodded. "Thank you. I appreciate your help." Andrew said, "It's no trouble. Everyone needs guidance sometimes." This simple interaction showed how using English in real-life situations builds confidence. In the park nearby, a man named Robert was jogging while his dog Ella ran happily ahead. He noticed a little boy named Ethan trying to fly a small kite. The kite got stuck in a tree branch. Robert approached and asked, "Do you want me to get it down for you?" Ethan nodded eagerly. Robert carefully retrieved the kite and handed it back. "Thanks, sir. I couldn't reach it." Robert smiled. "You're welcome. Enjoy flying it safely." At a local cafe, a woman named Grace was reading a book while waiting for her friend. The barista, a young man named Alex, greeted her. "Good morning. Would you like a latte or tea today?" Grace replied, "A latte, please. Thank you." Another customer, Thomas, entered, looking confused about the menu. Grace smiled and said, "Would you like me to explain the options?" Thomas nodded. "Yes, that would be very helpful." Grace explained each item slowly, helping Thomas feel more confident in English. Simple interactions like this built vocabulary and listening skills naturally. Meanwhile, in a small bookstore, a boy named Liam was browsing comic books. He picked up one and asked the cashier, a man named Jacob, "Is this book suitable for my age?" Jacob replied kindly, "Yes, it's appropriate and very popular with your age group." Liam smiled. "Thank you. I'll take it." Jacob said, "You're welcome. Enjoy reading and learning new words." This showed how English can be practiced in friendly, everyday situations, reinforcing polite conversation. At a nearby street, a man named Daniel was carrying groceries when he noticed an elderly woman, Mrs. Thompson, struggling to open her door. Daniel walked over and said, "Can I help you with that?" Mrs. Thompson smiled. "Oh, thank you, young man. That's very kind." Daniel opened the door and carried the bag inside. "It's no problem. I'm glad to help," he said. Moments like these emphasized how small gestures and English practice go hand in hand in real life. In the evening, Julia reflected on the day's simple but meaningful experiences. She remembered how each character she met, Andrew, Kevin, Samuel, Laura, Patrick, Anna, David, Lucas, and Mia, had found their own ways to connect and communicate naturally in English. Andrew guided Leo and helped Mia. Julia and Kevin served pastries and coffee. Samuel appreciated polite service. Laura assisted Patrick with his tire. Anna and David exchanged kind words while shopping. Lucas observed polite conversation. Each action demonstrated how English could be used naturally to connect, help, and communicate. By the end of the day, the city was quiet. Streetlights reflected softly on the pavements, families shared dinner, children played in small parks, and neighbors greeted each other warmly. Andrew and Mia practiced polite English while talking about the train. Julia smiled as she reflected on helping Samuel. Laura remembered guiding Patrick and felt satisfaction in teaching and helping. Anna and David enjoyed their evening after grocery shopping. Lucas appreciated the calm interactions he observed. Each person experienced English in real-life situations, helping, teaching, ordering food, or simply greeting someone, which strengthened vocabulary, listening, and conversational skills. These stories highlighted that English learning happens naturally in everyday life. Simple sentences, polite expressions, and real interactions are powerful tools for improving listening and speaking. Whether assisting someone, buying groceries, reading to a child, or chatting with a friend, opportunities for English practice are everywhere. Even as night fell, the city glowed softly with quiet reflections. Andrew and Leo discussed their morning walk. Julia and Kevin shared memories of busy mornings in the bakery. Laura thought about the lesson of patience with Patrick. Anna and David enjoyed the simple joy of fresh vegetables. Lucas reflected on polite exchanges. Mia felt more confident after learning the train schedule. Robert remembered helping Ethan with the kite. Grace practiced vocabulary by explaining the cafe menu to Thomas. Liam gained confidence choosing a suitable book. Daniel reflected on helping Mrs. Thompson. Through these ordinary yet meaningful moments, each person used English naturally, practiced polite conversation, and built listening and speaking skills in context. Small acts of kindness, guidance, and friendly dialogue made learning real and memorable. These everyday stories, from morning walks to helping neighbors, serving coffee, shopping, and reading books, showed how English can be part of life itself, practiced naturally and enjoyably. Emma smiled. Absolutely, it's worth picking them carefully. This simple exchange illustrated how everyday shopping can help learners practice polite conversation. Meanwhile, Benjamin delivered the pastries to Clara. She opened the box and smiled. "These look amazing. You always think of everything." Benjamin laughed. "I know how much you like them. Enjoy your breakfast." They shared a short, friendly conversation, practicing simple, natural English sentences. Moments like these demonstrated how daily interactions can strengthen listening and speaking skills in context. In the park, a man named Michael was jogging while his dog ran ahead. He noticed a young girl, Lily, trying to fly a kite that got stuck in a tree. Michael approached and said gently, "Do you need help?" Lily nodded eagerly. Michael climbed carefully, retrieved the kite, and handed it back. "Thanks, sir. I couldn't reach it," Lily said. Michael smiled. "You're welcome. Now fly it carefully." Real-life moments like this allow learners to hear and use natural English expressions in context. At a nearby cafe, a young woman named Grace was reading a book. The barista, a cheerful young man named Ryan, greeted her. "Good morning. Would you like a cappuccino today?" Grace nodded. "Yes, please. Thank you." Another customer, Thomas, looked confused about the menu. Grace smiled and offered, "I can help explain the options if you like." Thomas nodded. "That would be great." Grace explained slowly, highlighting key words. Thomas said, "Thank you. That helps a lot." Small conversations like these reinforced vocabulary, listening skills, and polite expressions in real-life scenarios. Across town, a boy named Samuel was struggling with homework at the table. His older sister, Julia, sat with him and said, "Let's read the questions carefully together." Samuel repeated slowly, "Read carefully." Julia guided him step by step, explaining vocabulary in simple sentences. Samuel smiled. "Now I understand." "Thank you, Julia." Julia replied, "You're welcome. Learning together makes it easier." Teaching and learning English in small, everyday moments helps build confidence and comprehension naturally. Meanwhile, at a local bookstore, a young man named Peter was looking for a book about animals. He approached the cashier, a man named Jacob, and asked politely, "Can you recommend a good book for me?" Jacob smiled. "Yes, this one is perfect for learning new words and interesting facts about animals." Peter nodded. "Thank you, I'll take it." Jacob replied, "You're welcome. Enjoy reading." These friendly interactions showed how English can be learned naturally while shopping, asking questions, and expressing gratitude. Across town, a man named Robert noticed an elderly woman, Mrs. Carter, trying to carry her groceries. He approached and said, "Can I help you with those?" Mrs. Carter smiled. "Oh, thank you, young man. That's very kind." Robert carried the bags inside and said, "It's no problem at all. I'm happy to help." Mrs. Carter replied, "You've made my day easier." Small gestures like this provide excellent listening and speaking practice for learners because they use simple, polite sentences naturally. By evening, Benjamin, Clara, Sophie, Ethan, Oliver, Hannah, Daniel, Emma, Lucas, Jacob, Michael, Lily, Grace, Ryan, Thomas, Samuel, Julia, Peter, and Robert, 20 characters in total, finished their day with a sense of accomplishment. Benjamin reflected on helping Noah climb the ladder. Sophie remembered serving customers with care. Hannah thought about assisting Daniel. Emma enjoyed her shopping experience. Michael helped Lily with her kite. Grace explained the menu to Thomas. Julia guided Samuel with homework. Peter chose a book with Jacob's help. Robert carried groceries for Mrs. Carter. All these ordinary yet meaningful moments were full of polite conversation, simple instructions, kind words, and useful English vocabulary. Words like "thank you," "you're welcome," "please," and "excuse me" appeared naturally in context. Each character used English in practical ways, helping, guiding, shopping, teaching, or greeting, making learning enjoyable and meaningful. Small everyday actions turned into lessons in listening, speaking, and connecting with others. Even as night settled over the city, the lessons remained. Kindness, patience, careful listening, and polite speaking are key to practicing English in real life. Andrew and Benjamin reflected on helping others. Sophie and Ethan enjoyed friendly customer interactions. Hannah and Daniel practiced step-by-step explanations. Emma and Lucas shared polite conversations while shopping. Michael and Lily experienced guidance and learning. Grace and Thomas practiced explanations in context. Julia and Samuel focused on understanding and repeating new words. Peter and Jacob explored books together. Robert assisted Mrs. Carter with care. Through these ordinary yet meaningful moments, English learning became natural and practical. Every interaction, whether greeting someone, helping with a task, or explaining something, provided an opportunity to practice real English. From morning to evening, the city was alive with stories of learning, kindness, and communication. These small moments added up, helping characters gain confidence, expand vocabulary, and understand polite expressions. By the time the city was quiet, the characters had experienced a full day of English in action. Each conversation, act of kindness, and simple interaction created memorable learning experiences. Polite words, patient explanations, and natural dialogues made English part of daily life, showing learners that practice is everywhere, in every interaction and every small act of kindness. Even as the night deepened, the lessons of the day were clear. Every greeting, question, offer of help, or simple thank you is a chance to improve English. Daily life is full of stories to learn from. Walking in the park, shopping, helping others, teaching, reading, or chatting in a cafe. By observing, listening, speaking politely, and repeating new words, anyone can make English learning part of life, step by step, day by day.